In the sun-scorched border town of Mesa Roja, where dust devils danced across empty streets and hope seemed as scarce as rain, few people noticed how Dr. Ray Sullivan's hands never trembled when treating injured animals. They didn't realize that the same fingers that could delicately stitch up a wounded puppy had once assembled sniper rifles in complete darkness. The local cartel was about to learn that the quiet, mobile veterinarian who served their community harbored far deadlier skills than healing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered sign of Mesa Roja Veterinary Services, where Dr. Sullivan methodically cleaned his mobile clinic's surgical instruments. His movements were precise, economical. Each motion served a purpose, a habit ingrained from years of training that had nothing to do with veterinary school. Maria Delgado watched him from the clinic's front desk, fascinated as always by his unwavering focus. In 3 years of working as his veterinary technician, she'd never seen him waste a single movement or speak an unnecessary word. "Doc, have you ever thought about taking a vacation?" she asked, updating their appointment calendar. "You've been on call every day since I started working here." A slight smile crossed his face, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. "What would I do with time off, Maria?" His voice was soft, gentle, the kind that made anxious animals calm down and their owners lean in closer to hear. It was also the kind of voice that made people underestimate him, which suited Ray just fine. The clinic was quiet this afternoon, just Mrs. Garcia waiting with her elderly chihuahua and Dr. Harrison reading a magazine while his cat recovered. From a routine procedure, Dr. Harrison, the town's other veterinarian, occasionally glanced at Ray from across the room, one of the few people who suspected there was more to the quiet vet than met the eye. The peaceful routine was shattered by the roar of high-performance engines as 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot, their tinted windows reflecting the harsh desert sun. Maria's hand froze over the appointment book, her face draining of color. "Los Sangre," she whispered. Ray's hands didn't pause in their work, but something flickered in his eyes, a shadow so brief anyone else might have missed it. Maria didn't miss much, though. She'd worked in emergency animal hospitals long enough to read tension in both animals and humans. "Victor Ortega," she said, her voice dropping. "I thought his people stayed up in the mountains near the border." "Times change," Dr. Harrison sighed, quickly gathering his recovering cat and carrier. "They've been pushing into new territory since the DEA crackdown up north, probably looking for new distribution routes." Ray continued his methodical work, but his awareness had shifted. He noted the position of every person in the clinic, the distance to each exit, the angle of approach from the parking lot. Old habits died hard. The clinic's door chimed as 4 men entered. Their leader, Victor Ortega, moved with the casual arrogance of someone used to being feared. Behind him, 2 muscled enforcers, Ramos and Cruz, scanned the room, while a younger man, barely out of his teens, clutched a blood-stained towel wrapped around something small. "Where's the doctor?" Victor demanded, his gold chains glinting in the fluorescent light. "I'm Dr. Sullivan," Ray replied softly, setting down the instrument he'd been cleaning. "How can I help?" Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in Ray's calm demeanor and slight build. "My cousin's dog, very valuable breeding animal. Something's wrong." The young man stepped forward, carefully unwrapping the towel to reveal a trembling French bulldog puppy. The dog's breathing was labored, its gums pale blue. Ray's assessment was instant. Probable congenital heart defect, common in poorly bred designer dogs from illegal puppy mills. He kept his face neutral. "Let's have a look." As he gently examined the puppy, Ray was acutely aware of the men's positions in the room. Ramos and Cruz had spread out, one near the door, one by the reception desk where Maria sat rigid with fear. The young man Diego, he'd heard Victor call him, watched anxiously as Ray checked the puppy's vital signs. "She needs surgery," Ray said quietly. "Her heart isn't formed properly. It's a genetic condition." "Fix it," Victor demanded. "Money is no object." "It's not about money," Ray replied, still focused on the trembling puppy. "She needs a specialist. Equipment I don't have here. The nearest facility that can help is in—" "You will fix her," Victor cut him off, his voice dropping dangerously. "Now." Ray finally looked up, meeting Victor's gaze. "I understand your concern, but attempting surgery here would kill her. She needs—" The sound of a hand slamming into the reception desk made everyone jump. Ramos loomed over Maria, who shrank back in her chair. "The boss told you to fix the dog, pendejo. You don't say no to the boss." Ray's hands remained steady on the puppy, but his stance shifted imperceptibly. To most, he still looked like nothing more than a concerned veterinarian trying to save a sick animal. But Dr. Harrison saw how the man's weight had settled on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction. "The puppy has hours, maybe less," Ray said, his voice still calm. "I can give her medication to help her breathe, but she needs proper cardiac surgery. I'm trying to save her life." Victor stepped closer, invading Ray's personal space. "And I'm trying to help you understand something, Doctor. When I tell you to do something, you do it. My family owns this town. We can make things very difficult for people who don't cooperate." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Garcia clutched her chihuahua tighter, edging toward the door. Dr. Harrison remained frozen in place, his cat carrier gripped white-knuckled in his hands. "I don't respond well to threats," Ray said softly, still cradling the sick puppy. "Neither does medicine. The puppy needs a specialist. That's not a negotiation, it's a medical fact." Ramos cracked his knuckles menacingly. "Maybe we need to help." "The doctor focus better, boss. Show him how we handle—" His words cut off as the puppy went limp in Ray's hands. In the sudden silence, his fingers moved with incredible speed and precision, beginning chest compressions on the tiny animal. His face showed intense concentration, but his awareness remained razor-sharp. "Maria," he called quietly, "get me the emergency kit. Now." She moved to comply, but Ramos grabbed her arm. "Nobody moves until the boss says." "Your choice," Ray said, continuing compressions. "Let her help me save this puppy, or explain to your cousin why his $1,000 dog died, because you wanted to prove how tough you are." Victor's face darkened, but he nodded sharply. Ramos released Maria, who quickly brought over the red emergency kit. Ray worked with mechanical precision, administering medication, continuing compressions, until finally the puppy took a shuddering breath. Relief flooded Diego's young face, but Victor's expression remained thunderous. "You got lucky, Doctor. But this isn't over. No one talks to me or my men that way." "Your puppy is stable for now," Ray replied, his voice professional and detached. "But she has maybe 6 hours before her heart fails completely. There's a specialist in—" "Shut up," Victor snapped. "Diego, take the dog. We're leaving." He leaned in close to Ray, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll be back, Doctor. We'll discuss respect then." As the cartel members left with the puppy, the clinic seemed to exhale collectively. Maria slumped in her chair, hands shaking. Mrs. Garcia hurriedly gathered her chihuahua and scurried out. Only Dr. Harrison remained, studying Ray with new understanding. "That was either very brave or very stupid," the older vet said quietly. Ray continued cleaning up the emergency supplies, his movements as precise as ever. "Just medicine," he replied. "Nothing brave about it." "They'll be back," Maria whispered. "Everyone knows what happens when Los Sangre feels disrespected." "Yes," Ray agreed, his voice carrying a weight it hadn't before. "They'll be back." Dr. Harrison moved closer, speaking softly so only Ray could hear. "Those hands of yours, they've done more than veterinary work, haven't they? I served as a medic in Desert Storm. I know that look, that stance." Ray's hand stilled for just a moment. We all have passed, John. Some are best left there. Maybe, Harrison replied, but sometimes the past has a way of becoming exactly what the present needs. Outside, the sun was setting, painting Mesa Roja in shades of blood red that gave the town its name. Ray watched the cartel SUVs disappear into the gathering darkness, his mind already calculating angles, approaches, response times. Old habits indeed, Maria, he said quietly. Take tomorrow off. In fact, take the rest of the week. But the clinic will be fine, he finished. Some storms are better waited out alone. As Maria gathered her things, Ray continued his work. Each movement still measured, still precise. But now those movements carried a different quality, like a weapon being cleaned and prepared. The cartel had made a crucial mistake, one that would soon prove fatal. They thought they were dealing with just another small-town vet. They couldn't have known that Dr. Ray Sullivan had more confirmed kills than their entire organization combined, or that their threats would awaken something they thought long buried, the ghost of a man who had once been the most lethal member of an elite special forces unit. A man who had traded his rifle for a scalpel, seeking peace in healing rather than killing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A man who was about to remind them that the most dangerous predators aren't always the ones who bare their teeth first. Night settled over Mesa Roja like a heavy blanket, bringing with it an unseasonal chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Ray moved through his clinic with practiced efficiency, securing medications in the safe and ensuring all sharp instruments were properly stored. To anyone watching, he appeared to be going through his normal closing routine. But there was nothing normal about the way his eyes constantly scanned the windows, or how he'd positioned himself to maintain clear sight lines to all approaches. The quiet was broken by a soft knock at the back door. Dr. Harrison stood there, holding a worn leather medical bag. Thought you might need some supplies, he said, stepping inside. Especially if what I suspect about you is true. Ray continued his work, neither confirming nor denying the older vet's implications. You should be home, John. It's not safe here. Tonight. That's exactly why I'm here. Harrison set his bag on the examination table. 20 years as a combat medic, I learned to read people. The way you handle yourself, the precision of your movements. You're not just ex-military, you're something else entirely. A police cruiser rolled past the clinic, slowing briefly before continuing on its patrol. Ray watched its reflection in the window, noting the officer's nervous glance toward the clinic. Word had already spread about his confrontation with Los Sangre. Delta Force, Ray said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. 15 years. 8 months, 23 days. Not that anyone's counting, Harrison nodded slowly. I figured it was something like that. The way you handled that puppy's cardiac episode, those weren't just a vet's hands. That was combat medicine muscle. Memory. Different battlefield, same principles, Ray replied, checking the locks on the clinic's windows. Maintain focus. Control the situation. Stay ahead of the threat. And now? Harrison asked. Los Sangre doesn't forgive perceived insults. They'll come at you with everything they have. A ghost of a smile crossed Ray's face. They'll try. Before Harrison could respond, both men froze at the sound of approaching vehicles. But instead of the expected cartel SUVs, a beaten-up pickup truck came to a stop behind the clinic. Diego, Victor's young cousin, jumped out, still cradling the sick French bulldog. "Dr. Sullivan!" he called out urgently. "Please, she's getting worse." Ray moved to the back door, his movements casual but his body coiled for action. "You shouldn't be here, Diego." Your cousin made his position clear. "I don't care." Diego's voice cracked with emotion. "She's dying. Victor won't listen, says his pride is worth more than getting her proper help. But I can't. I won't let her die because of his ego." Ray studied the young man carefully. "No. Weapons visible, genuine distress in his body language, and most importantly, he'd come alone. After a moment's consideration, Ray opened the door. "Bring her in." As Diego rushed past with the puppy, Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" "No," Ray admitted. "But sometimes you have to risk trusting someone to save a life. That's something else I learned in combat." The puppy's condition had deteriorated significantly. Her breathing was shallow, her gums now a dangerous shade of grey. Ray worked quickly, setting up oxygen and preparing emergency medications. "Her heart's failing," he explained to Diego. "Without proper surgery, she won't make it through the night." "Then do the surgery," Diego pleaded. "Victor will pay whatever—" "It's not about money," Ray interrupted gently. "This requires a pediatric cardiac specialist, equipment I don't have. She needs—" The sound of screeching tires cut through the night. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. "They followed me," Diego whispered, face pale with fear. "I thought I was careful, but they must have—" "Get in the back room," Ray ordered, his voice suddenly carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "Both of you, take the puppy. No matter what you hear, don't come out until I call you." "Ray!" Harrison started to protest, but something in the younger man's eyes stopped him. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the eyes of Special Forces operators in combat zones. The switch had been flipped. As Harrison and Diego retreated, with the puppy, Ray moved through the clinic, turning off lights, creating shadows and blind spots he could use to his advantage. His movements were different now. Gone was the gentle veterinarian, replaced by something predatory and precise. 4 black SUVs surrounded the clinic, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Victor emerged from the lead vehicle, flanked by Ramos, Cruz, and at least 8 other heavily armed men. "Bring him out," Victor shouted. "My idiot cousin too. Nobody disrespects Los Sangre and lives to brag about it." Ray positioned himself in the shadows near the front desk, calculating angles and distances. 11 targets total, all armed, likely body armor. They'd come prepared for a fight, but they'd prepared for the wrong kind of opponent. The clinic's front door burst open as Ramos and Cruz led the way in, weapons drawn. The other enforcers spread out, covering the room with practiced efficiency. In different circumstances, Ray might have admired their tactical awareness. "Where are you, Doctor?" Victor called out, stepping through the doorway. "No more clever words. No more lectures about medicine and morality. Let Diego take the puppy to the specialist." Ray's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "After that, we can discuss respect all you want." Victor's face twisted with rage. "You still don't understand your situation, do you? There is no discussion. There is only—" His words cut off as the lights went out, plunging the clinic into total darkness. In the confusion that followed, Ray moved like a ghost through the shadows he'd so carefully created. The first enforcer went down silently, a precise strike to the vagus nerve dropping him before he could make a sound. The second had time for half a surprised grunt before an arm lock cut off blood flow to his brain, rendering him unconscious in seconds. "Find him!" Victor shouted as his men fumbled with flashlights. "How hard can it be to—" A flashlight beam caught Ray in mid-motion, but by then it was too late. He flowed through the cartel members like water through rocks, each movement ending in a precise application of force. No wasted energy, no dramatic flourishes. Just the lethal efficiency that had made him legendary in another life. Ramos managed to get off a wild shot that shattered a glass cabinet before Ray disarmed him with a move that left the enforcer's wrist and shoulder dislocated. Cruz fared slightly better, landing a glancing blow before a lightning-fast combination sent him crashing into the reception desk. Through it all, Ray maintained perfect situational awareness, always knowing where every opponent was, never letting anyone get behind him. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. Victor, realizing his advantage in numbers meant nothing against this ghost in the darkness, reached for his gold-plated pistol. "What the hell are you?" "Just a vet," Ray replied softly, materializing behind him. Who's had enough bullies threatening his patients? The pistol went flying as Ray's hand clamped down on Victor's gun arm with mechanical precision. The cartel leader found himself pinned, his own weapon pressed against his temple. 8 years in Delta Force's Direct Action Unit. Ray's voice was barely a whisper. 4 more with a classified network team. 3 years as a combat medic before. That. Would you like to know how many different ways I can end this? Victor's bravado crumbled. You're bluffing. No special forces operator becomes a small-town vet. Unless he's tired of killing, Ray replied. Unless he wants to save lives for a change. Unless he's trying very hard to leave certain skills behind. His grip tightened slightly, but those skills, they never really leave you. The remaining conscious cartel members stood frozen, unsure whether to risk shooting in the darkness. Their flashlight beams revealed their fallen comrades, none dead, but all efficiently incapacitated. Here's what's going to happen, Ray continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Diego is taking the puppy to the specialist in El Paso. You're going to pay for her treatment, and then you're going to forget this clinic exists. Because if you ever threaten my staff or my patients again, he let the sentence hang unfinished. You can't take on the whole cartel, Victor managed through clenched teeth. I don't want to, Ray replied. I just want to heal animals in peace. But make no mistake, if you force me to be something else, what happened here tonight will seem like a warm-up. To demonstrate his point, he shifted his grip slightly, applying pressure to a nerve cluster that made Victor gasp in pain. Do we understand each other? Before Victor could respond, red and blue lights began flashing outside. Someone had called the police, probably neighbors who'd heard the commotion. Your choice, Ray said quietly. Either we're having a late night consultation about your cousin's dog, or the police find out exactly what Los Sangre was doing here, along with all the interesting things I'm sure they'd find in your vehicles. Victor's face contorted with rage and fear, but self-preservation won out. Stand down, he ordered his remaining men. Get the others up, we're leaving. Ray released him, stepping back into the shadows. Diego, he called out, bring the puppy. I'll write you directions to the specialist. As the young man emerged with the sick dog, Ray kept his position of tactical advantage, watching as the cartel members dragged their unconscious companions out to the vehicles. Victor paused at the door, his face a mask of barely contained fury. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, Ray replied calmly. It is, because now you know what you're dealing with. And if you're as smart as I think you are, you'll realize that pushing this further only ends one way. His voice hardened slightly. I've spent 5 years trying to forget who I used to be. Don't make me remember. After the cartel vehicles disappeared into the night, Harrison emerged from the back room, surveying the destruction with wide eyes. I've never seen anything like it. Let's hope you never have to again, Ray replied, already beginning to clean up the mess. His movements were back to those of a simple veterinarian, but something had changed. The facade had cracked, revealing the steel underneath. As police sirens grew closer, Harrison helped him right an overturned examination table. They won't. Let this go, you know. Los Sangre can't afford to look weak. No, Ray agreed, checking the puppy's vitals one last time before sending Diego on his way. But they can afford to be smart. Victor will spend the night thinking about what happened here, about how many of his men I could have killed but didn't, about the fact that somewhere in his territory there's a former Delta operator who knows how to wage the kind of war he's never faced before. He straightened up, his eyes distant. By morning, he'll convince himself that leaving me alone is the wisest course of action, because men like Victor, they don't fear death, they fear ghosts, and tonight they saw one they'll never forget. Dawn broke over Mesa Roja, painting the desert sky in shades of amber and gold. Ray stood at his clinic's window, watching the town slowly come to life. His shoulder ached where he'd taken a hit during the night's confrontation. Not that anyone would notice. He'd learned long ago how to mask pain, just as he'd learned to hide so many other things. The police had come and gone, accepting his explanation about a late-night emergency with Victor Ortega's dog. If they suspected more, they didn't show it. In a border town like Mesa Roja, sometimes official blindness was the safest policy. The clinic's phone rang, breaking the morning silence. It was Diego, calling from El Paso with news that the puppy's surgery had been successful. Ray listened quietly, letting the young man's grateful words wash over him. This, he reminded himself, was why he'd chosen this life: to heal, to save, to make a difference without violence. But as he hung up the phone, another call came in. This one made his blood run cold. "Impressive work last night, Ghost." The voice was familiar in a way that made Ray's combat instincts surge to life. 11 cartel gunmen and not a single fatality. You've gone soft. Winters. Ray's voice was flat, emotionless. "How did you find me?" Colonel James Winters chuckled darkly. "Did you really think you could disappear? The unit's best operator just hanging up his rifle to play animal doctor? We've known where you were all along." "We?" Ray's mind was already racing, calculating possibilities, threats, angles of attack. Let's just say certain interests are very concerned about Los Sangre's activities in your area. Your little display last night got their attention. And mine. Ray's hand tightened on the phone. "I'm out, James. Have been for 5 years. Nobody's ever really out, Ghost. You know that better than anyone. Remember Tehran?" Images flashed through Ray's mind. Blood on sand, the weight of decisions that had haunted him ever since. That mission was a mistake. We crossed lines we never should have crossed. "We did what was necessary," Winters countered. "Just like, what's necessary now? Los Sangre isn't just another cartel. They're moving something big through Mesa Roja. Something that has very important people very worried. Not my problem anymore. It became your problem the moment you decided to embarrass Victor Ortega in front of his men. He's already called in reinforcements. By sunset, you'll have 30 cartel gunmen in your town, all looking to restore Los Sangre's reputation." Ray's jaw tightened. "You're enjoying this." "Maybe a little," Winters admitted, "but I'm also offering you a way out. The agency wants Los Sangre shut down. They're willing to reinstate your clearance, provide whatever support you need. One last mission, Ghost. For old time's sake. I don't do that kind of work anymore. No, those men last night might disagree. Face it, you can try to bury who you are, but the ghost always comes back. It's in your blood." Before Ray could respond, Dr. Harrison's truck pulled into the clinic's parking lot. "I have to go," he said firmly. "Think about it," Winters replied, "but don't take too long. When those 30 gunmen arrive, you might wish you had backup." The line went dead. Harrison entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, but his smile faded when he saw Ray's expression. "What's wrong? Remember how you said Los Sangre wouldn't let this go?" Ray accepted the coffee but didn't drink. "It's worse than we thought. They're calling in reinforcements." "How many?" 30, according to my source. Heavy hitters, probably from their operation in Juarez." Harrison whistled low. "That's an army." "No," Ray corrected quietly. "That's a message. They're not just coming to kill me, they're coming to make an example." "Then you need to leave," Harrison urged. "No one would blame you." Ray's answer was interrupted by Maria's arrival. She looked exhausted but determined. "I know you said to take the week off," she started, "but I'm not abandoning the clinic." "Maria," Ray began, but she cut him off. "No, listen. My father was a police officer in Juarez. He stood up to the cartels, refused to be bought. One day, 30 men came to our house." Her voice shook slightly. "He told us to run, said he'd hold them off. We never saw him alive again." Ray's expression softened. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, she replied fiercely. Be smart. You can't fight them alone. He won't be alone, Harrison interjected. I may be old, but I remember my combat training. No. Ray's voice carried the tone of command again. I appreciate the offer, but this isn't your fight, either of you. The best thing you can do is stay far away from here. Like my family did, Maria demanded. Run away while a good man dies fighting evil. Your father was a hero, Ray said gently, and you're not. She challenged me. I saw what you did last night, how you protected Diego and his puppy, how you dealt with those men without killing them. That's the kind of hero we need. The morning. Sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the clean, orderly clinic. Everything in its place, everything serving a purpose, just like Ray had wanted his new life to be. You don't understand what you're asking, he said finally. The man who could take on 30 cartel gunmen. He's not someone you want to know. He's not someone I want to be anymore. But he's someone we need, Harrison pressed. Sometimes the past comes back because the present demands it. Ray's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Coordinates, followed by 3 words that made his blood run cold. Remember the box? His hand instinctively went to his chest, where a small key hung on a chain beneath his shirt. 5 years ago, before leaving his old life behind, he'd stored certain items in a secure location, things he'd hoped never to need again. The clinic has insurance, Harrison said, reading his expression. Whatever happens, we can rebuild. It's not about the building, Ray replied. When I came here, I made a promise to myself. No more violence, no more death, no more being a ghost that keeps men awake at night. And you've kept that promise, Maria insisted. 5 years of healing, of saving lives. But sometimes, to protect peace, you have to be willing to fight for it. Ray was silent for a long moment, his mind racing through scenarios, possibilities, consequences. Finally, he spoke. If, and I mean if, I do this, there are things you need to understand. The man who comes back, he's not the same one who's been treating your pets. He's someone else, someone darker. We trust you, Harrison said simply. You shouldn't. Ray's voice was heavy with memory. The things I've done, the lines I've crossed, there's a reason I walked away. And there's a reason you're here now, Maria countered. Maybe this is your chance to use those skills for something right, something pure. Ray's phone buzzed again, another text from Winters. Clock's ticking, Ghost. Cartel convoy spotted. Crossing the border. He looked around the clinic, at the place he'd built, the life he'd created. Then he thought of Diego, of the risks the young man had taken to save a puppy's life, of Maria's father, dying alone against overwhelming odds, of all the people in Mesa Roja who deserved better than to live under cartel rule. If we do this, he said finally, we do it my way. No heroics, no revenge missions. We protect the innocent, nothing more. Harrison nodded. Your lead, your rules. Maria. Ray turned to her. I need you to do something important. There's a specialist clinic in Albuquerque. Call them. Tell them we need emergency housing for any critical patients. Get our most vulnerable animals transferred there today. You think it'll get that bad? I think it's better to be prepared. He turned to Harrison. John, I need you to spread the word quietly. Anyone who can leave town for a few days should do so. Anyone who stays needs to be off the streets by sunset. And you? Maria asked. Ray's hand went to the key around his neck. I need to retrieve something I hoped never to see again. His voice dropped lower. And then I need to remember how to be someone I've spent 5 years trying to forget. As his staff began their preparations, Ray made another call, one he'd hoped never to make again. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Martinez Secure Storage. Authorization code Delta 7 Ghost Echo 9. A pause, then. Storage unit accessed once in 5 years, 3 months, contents unchanged. Shall I prepare for retrieval? Ray closed his eyes, seeing again the faces of those he'd hunted, those he'd killed, those he'd failed to save. Yes, the ghost is coming home. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of Mesa Roja, a nondescript building of corrugated steel baking in the desert sun. Ray parked his truck around back, away from casual observation. The key around his neck felt heavier than it had in years. Inside, the facility manager, a retired Marine named Cooper, merely nodded at Ray's approach. No words were exchanged as they walked to a biometric scanner hidden behind a false electrical panel. Ray pressed his palm against it, then entered a 12-digit code from memory. The storage unit looked like any other from the outside. Inside was a different story. Ray pulled the heavy metal box from its hiding place, his movements mechanical, as if his body remembered a routine his mind had tried to forget. "Been wondering when you'd come back for this," Cooper said quietly. "Word travels fast in a border town." Ray didn't respond as he opened the box, revealing its carefully packed contents. A customized Barrett Emrad sniper rifle, broken down into components, 3 handguns with suppressors, a tactical vest containing specialized equipment, various other tools of a trade he'd walked away from, but it was the smaller case beneath everything else that gave him pause. Inside lay a matte black mask, designed to conceal the wearer's face, while allowing maximum visibility and breathing efficiency. The mask that had given him his code name, the Ghost. "Figured you for agency," Cooper continued. "Way you carried yourself, way you watched sightlines even when treating people's pets." "That obvious?" Ray asked, checking each piece of equipment with practiced precision. "To someone who knows what to look for." Cooper shrugged. "Did 3 tours with Force Recon. You see enough operators, you learn to spot them, even when they're trying to hide." Ray began assembling his gear with swift, economical movements. Each piece clicked into place. Like he'd never stopped doing this, muscle memory overriding 5 years of deliberate forgetfulness. "You know what's coming?" Cooper asked. "Los Sangre, 30 gunmen by sunset. Whole town's talking about what you did to Ortega's crew last night. No guns, no kills, just efficient takedowns." Cooper's voice carried a hint of admiration. "That's harder than going lethal." "That was the vet," Ray replied softly, checking the action on one of the handguns. This is something else." His phone buzzed. Another text from Winters. "Convoy past Las Cruces. 2 hours out. Sure you don't want backup?" Ray ignored it, focusing instead on his final equipment check. The familiar weight of the tactical vest felt like stepping back in time. Each piece of gear represented a capability, a possible solution to the problems ahead. But they also represented something else, a return to the darkness he'd tried so hard to leave behind. Cooper watched him work, recognition in his eyes. Ghost protocol, right? Create fear, use psychological warfare, make the enemy defeat themselves? Ray paused, surprised. "You know about that?" "Did some contract work after the Corps, heard stories about an operator who could infiltrate anywhere, take down any target, never left bodies, just broken men. Terrorists, warlords, cartel bosses, they'd be found zip-tied and waiting for extraction, their entire operations dismantled by a shadow they never saw coming." "Stories grow in the telling," Ray said dismissively, but Cooper shook his head. "Not these ones. These got smaller in the telling, because the reality was scarier than the myth." He gestured to the mask. "They said the Ghost could move through secured buildings like smoke, that he could read minds, predict movements, appear and disappear at will." "Training," Ray corrected. "Observation, psychology, nothing supernatural about it." "Tell that to the men who faced you." Cooper smiled grimly. Their reports all said the same thing, that fighting the Ghost wasn't like fighting a man, it was like fighting fear itself. Ray's phone buzzed again, this time a message from Maria. "All critical patients evacuated, Harrison's spreading. The word. Town's getting quiet. Good. Fewer civilians to worry about, fewer potential casualties. You're going to need a base of operations, Cooper said, watching Ray shoulder his gear. Somewhere private, with good sight lines and multiple exit routes. Already got one in mind. The clinic? Cooper raised an eyebrow. Bold choice. Also, obvious? Exactly. Ray allowed himself a small smile. They'll expect me to abandon it, find somewhere more tactical, which makes it perfect. Because they'll be watching for you everywhere else. Cooper nodded approvingly. While you turn your home ground into a trap. Something like that. Ray paused at the door. Cooper, if this goes bad, I'll make sure any evidence of your past disappears, the former Marine promised, though something tells me that won't be necessary. As Ray loaded his equipment into the truck, another message came through, not from Winters this time, but from an unknown number. Ghost active status detected. Tehran assets alerted. Contingency plans in effect. His blood ran cold. Tehran, the mission that had changed everything. The operation that had made him walk away. If those players were getting involved, the drive back to the clinic gave him time to think, to plan. The Ghost had always worked alone, using fear and psychological warfare to multiply his effectiveness. But this was different. This time he had people to protect, a community that needed him. He found Maria and Harrison waiting at the clinic, their faces showing equal parts concern and determination. Town's mostly empty, Harrison reported. Those who couldn't leave are locked down tight. Police chief suddenly decided to take his whole force to a training seminar in Santa Fe. Convenient, Ray noted dryly. More like a survival instinct, Maria added. They know what's coming. They're staying out of it. Ray began unpacking his gear, setting up equipment in pre-selected positions throughout the clinic. As he worked, he outlined his plan. Not because he needed their input, but because they needed to understand what was about to happen. Los Sangre is used to fighting ordinary opponents, he explained. People who can be intimidated, who follow predictable patterns. The Ghost Protocol is designed to break those expectations, to make them face something they don't understand and can't predict, like what you did last night, Maria observed, but on a larger scale. Last night was improvised close-quarters combat, Ray corrected. This will be different, systematic, progressive. By the time they realize what's happening, their own fear will be working against them. And if that doesn't work, Harrison asked quietly, if they push through the fear? Ray's hand rested on the black mask. Then they learn why the stories about the ghosts get told in whispers. A distant rumble of engines caught their attention. Maria rushed to the window, then quickly stepped back. Multiple vehicles on the highway, still a few miles out but moving. I'm vast. You two need to leave, Ray said firmly. What's coming? You don't want to be part of it. We're not going anywhere, Harrison insisted. You need eyes on different approaches, someone to monitor police bands, maybe provide medical support if things go bad. This isn't a debate. No, Maria agreed, her voice steel. It's not. You spent 5 years being part of this community. Now let the community help you protect it. Ray studied them both, seeing the determination in their eyes. Something stirred in his chest. An unfamiliar warmth breaking through the cold, tactical calculations of the Ghost. All right, he conceded finally, but you follow my instructions exactly. No heroics, no risks. If I give an order, you obey instantly. Clear? They nodded, and Ray began assigning them positions and tasks. As they worked, his phone buzzed one final time. A message from Winters. Tehran assets moving. Ghost Protocol may be compromised. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Ray deleted the message. The Ghost might work alone, but Dr. Ray Sullivan had found something he never had before. People worth fighting for. A community worth protecting. The cartel was about to learn that the most dangerous predator isn't the lone wolf, but the one defending its pack, As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ray lifted the black mask, studying its familiar contours. 5 years of peace, of healing, of trying to forget. All ending because of men who mistook kindness for weakness, mercy for vulnerability. "Ghost protocol initiated," he whispered, sliding the mask into place. "May God have mercy on their souls, because the ghost never does." Dusk settled over Mesa Roja like a shroud, bringing with it the distant rumble of approaching vehicles. From his position on the clinic's roof, Ray watched through his scope as the cartel convoy approached, 5 SUVs and 3 pickup trucks, all heavily armed. He counted 32 men total, more than expected. Victor had clearly called in every resource available. "They're splitting up!" Maria's voice came through his earpiece from her observation post in the back office. 3 vehicles heading down Main Street, the rest circling around back. "Trying to cut off escape routes," Harrison added from his position, monitoring police bands and surveillance cameras they'd hastily set up. Classic pincer movement. Ray remained silent, watching through his scope as the cartel gunmen began deploying. Their movements were disciplined, professional. These weren't street thugs, but experienced fighters. Victor had brought in serious muscle. "Getting movement on thermal," Maria reported. 2-man teams sweeping the alleys. "They're being thorough." "They learned from last night," Ray replied softly. "No more rushing in blind." He switched channels. On his radio. "Cooper, you seeing any additional vehicles approaching town?" "Negative, Ghost," the former Marine replied from his observation post at the storage facility. "But I've got eyes on what looks like a support team setting up in the abandoned gas station. Spotters with high-powered optics." Everything was proceeding exactly as Ray had predicted. The cartel was being cautious, methodical, which meant they were playing right into his hands. "Remember," he instructed his impromptu team, "no matter what happens, maintain radio discipline. If you need to communicate, use the codes we established. And if I give the order to evacuate, we're not leaving," Maria interrupted firmly. "Maria, with respect, Ghost," she said, using his operational name for the first time. "Shut up and focus on the mission." Despite himself, Ray smiled behind his mask. Then the smile vanished as he spotted a familiar face among the cartel leaders, a man whose presence changed everything. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "Eduardo the Surgeon Vasquez is with them." "Who?" Harrison asked. "Former Mexican Special Forces," Ray explained. "Expert in counterinsurgency and psychological warfare. If he's here, this isn't just about revenge anymore. They're treating this like a military operation. Is that bad?" "No," Ray replied, his voice taking on a predatory edge. "That's perfect. Because now they're thinking like soldiers instead of gangsters, and soldiers can be broken." He activated his throat mic. "Ghost Protocol Phase 1 initiating. Stand by." The cartel teams had established a perimeter around the clinic, their weapons trained on every possible exit. Victor stood with Vasquez behind the line of vehicles, studying the building's darkened windows. "No movement," one of the spotters reported. "Building appears empty." "He's here," Vasquez replied confidently. "This is his territory. He'll defend it." "Your reputation says otherwise, Surgeon," Victor sneered. "You said you knew how to handle American Special Forces." "I do," Vasquez smiled coldly. "They're predictable, trained to think in tactical patterns. Once you understand those patterns, his..." Words were cut off by a sound that made every cartel gunman freeze, children's laughter echoing from somewhere in the darkness. It was followed by the soft chiming of an ice cream truck's bell. "What the hell?" one of the gunmen whispered. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, growing louder then fading away, moving around the perimeter in ways that defied logic. Then they stopped, replaced by something else, the slow, steady beeping of a heart monitor. "Playing games," Vasquez spat. trying to unnerve us with psychological tactics. Is it working? Victor demanded as several of his men shifted nervously. Before Vasquez could respond, every light in the clinic blazed to life simultaneously, momentarily blinding anyone looking directly at the building. When their vision cleared, the lights were out again. But now something had changed. Movement. A spotter called out. Multiple targets, all directions. The cartel gunmen spun, weapons raised, but saw nothing. The thermal imaging teams reported the same, flickers of heat signatures that disappeared as soon as they were detected. Hold your positions, Vasquez ordered. He's trying to... This time it was his radio that interrupted him. Sir, we've got movement in the West Alley. 2 men down, no shots fired. Impossible, Vasquez snarled. That alley is covered by 3 teams. They're just unconscious, another voice reported. But sir, their weapons are gone. Ray watched through his scope as the cartel's disciplined formation began to show cracks. Men were bunching together, abandoning their assigned positions to stay closer to their companions. Exactly as planned. Phase 1 complete, he whispered into his mic. Beginning phase 2. The next few minutes became a nightmare for the cartel forces. Men would disappear silently from their posts, only to be found zip-tied and unconscious minutes later. Weapons vanished from secured positions. Radios crackled with phantom transmissions. Snippets of conversation, orders that hadn't been given, cries for help from positions that were supposedly secure. He's playing with us, one of the gunmen muttered, like a cat with mice. Shut up, Vasquez shouted. This is basic psyops. He's one man. He can't be everywhere at... The explosion caught everyone by surprise. One of the SUVs erupted in flames, sending men diving for cover. But there had been no sound of detonation, no warning. The vehicle had simply become an inferno. How? Victor demanded. How did he get past our lines? He didn't, Vasquez replied grimly. That charge was planted. Hours ago. We're not attacking his position. We're standing in his kill box. Ray's voice came through their radios, calm and measured. 32 targets, 5 already neutralized, no fatalities yet. Your choice how this ends. Find him. Victor screamed. Burn that clinic to the ground. But his men were already falling back, their formation completely broken. Years of cartel experience meant nothing against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even comprehend. Stand your ground, Vasquez commanded. This is textbook ghost protocol. He's trying to make us defeat ourselves. You know, this technique? Victor grabbed the former Special Forces operator's arm. I've seen it before. Tehran, 5 years ago. An entire terrorist network dismantled by one operator. No bodies, no evidence, just... Vasquez's eyes widened. Mother of God. He's the same one. The ghost. The name rippled through the cartel ranks like a physical force. Even hardened killers had heard the whispered stories. Ray's voice came again, this time seemingly from the darkness itself. Very good, Eduardo. Now tell them the rest. Tell them what happened to the men who faced the ghost in Tehran. Lies, Vasquez said, but his voice shook slightly. Urban legends. 27 hardened. Fighters? Ray continued conversationally. Found alive but changed. Some never spoke again. Others couldn't sleep without lights. A few spent the rest of their lives in psychiatric care, jumping at shadows. He paused, letting the words sink in. Want to know the best part? I never laid a hand on most of them. Fear did all the work, just like it's doing now. As if to emphasize his point, more explosions erupted, not damaging ones, but carefully placed charges that filled the air with smoke and confusion. In the chaos, 3 more cartel gunmen vanished from their positions. Pull back, Vasquez ordered. Regroup at the vehicles. But as the men retreated, they found their escape routes cut off by walls of fire that seemed to appear from nowhere. More pre-planted charges, creating a corridor of flame that herded them exactly where Ray wanted them. Stop running! Victor screamed. "He's one man! One man cannot defeat Los Sangre." "I already have." Ray's voice came from everywhere at once. "Look around you. Your men are broken." Their will to fight died the moment they realized what they were facing. Now they're just waiting for an excuse to run. As if to prove his point, 4 more cartel gunmen broke ranks, sprinting for their vehicles. No one tried to stop them. "Last chance," Ray announced. "Surrender now, walk away alive. Fight on and I stop being merciful." Victor raised his gold-plated pistol to the clinic's dark windows. "Come out and face me. Face me like a man." "A man?" The voice was behind him now, impossibly close. "I gave up being just a man a long time ago." Victor spun, firing wildly, but hit nothing. When he turned back, he found himself staring into the black mask of the ghost, who stood less than 3 feet away. "How?" Victor stumbled backward. "How did you—" "I could tell you," Ray replied softly. "But then you'd have to live with the knowledge. Trust me, that's a burden you don't want." Vasquez raised his weapon, but Ray was already moving. What followed was a demonstration of close-quarters combat that would give hardened veterans nightmares. The ghost flowed through the remaining cartel gunmen like smoke, each movement precise, economical, and devastatingly effective. When it was over, only Victor and Vasquez remained standing. Around them lay their men, all alive, all breathing, but thoroughly incapacitated. "Impossible," Vasquez whispered. "No one moves like that. No one can—" "The ghost does," Ray replied simply. Then he turned to Victor. "Now, about that conversation on respect we needed to have." Victor Ortega had always considered himself a man who understood power, but standing before the ghost in the smoke-filled street, surrounded by his incapacitated men, he realized he'd never truly known what power was until this moment. "You think this ends here?" Victor's voice cracked with desperate bravado. "Los Sangre will send an army next time." "There won't be a next time," Ray replied softly, his masked face reflecting the flames still burning around them. "Because you're going to send a message about a small-town vet who's better left alone, about a clinic that's under protection." "Protection?" Vasquez laughed harshly. "You're one man. A ghost can't protect anything." "That's where you're wrong, Eduardo." Ray's voice carried a weight that made both men flinch. "I'm not just a ghost anymore. I'm something far more dangerous, a man with something to protect." Before either cartel leader could respond, a new sound cut through the night. Helicopter rotors, approaching fast. Ray's head snapped up, his posture changing instantly. "Multiple incoming!" Maria's voice crackled through his earpiece. 3 helicopters, no lights, military configuration." "Agency backup?" Harrison suggested hopefully. "No," Ray replied, his voice grim. "Tehran has come to Mesa Roja." As if to confirm his words, black-clad figures began fast roping from the helicopters, their movements precise and lethal. These weren't cartel gunmen or federal agents. They were something else entirely. "Inside," Ray ordered Victor and Vasquez. "Now." "Why should we—" Victor started, but Ray cut him off by literally lifting him off his feet. "Because what's coming is infinitely worse than me," he growled, shoving both men toward the clinic. "Maria, Harrison, execute contingency plan. Echo." Now. His team didn't argue, immediately beginning the procedures he'd outlined earlier. As Ray secured Victor and Vasquez in the clinic's back room, he heard Maria activating the backup generators and Harrison engaging the reinforced shutters on all windows. "Ghost." The voice came through his radio, cold and precise. "This is Artemis. You are in violation of Protocol Tehran 7. Stand down and prepare for extraction." Ray ignored the transmission, checking his remaining equipment. He'd known this might happen, that using the Ghost Protocol again might draw attention from certain parties, but he'd hoped to have more time. "What's happening?" Vasquez demanded, his professional demeanor cracking. "Who are they?" "Remember, Tehran. Ray replied, retrieving additional magazines from his hidden caches. Did you ever wonder why a single operator was sent to dismantle an entire terrorist network? Why the Ghost protocol was deployed against a relatively minor target? Understanding dawned in Vasquez's eyes. It was a test run, he whispered. The network wasn't the real target. No, Ray confirmed. The real target was the protocol itself. The agency wanted to know if one operator using psychological warfare could be more effective than traditional military action. They wanted to create an army of ghosts. But something went wrong, Victor said, showing unexpected insight. Everything went wrong. Ray's voice carried echoes of old pain. The protocol worked too well. The psychological damage it inflicted, it wasn't just effective, it was inhuman. I watched strong men break, not from torture or violence, but from the sheer terror of facing something they couldn't understand. Ghost, this is your final warning, Artemis's voice came again. The protocol cannot be allowed to operate independently. You know the dangers. Ray keyed his radio. The danger was never the protocol, Artemis. It was what you wanted to do with it. How many more teams did you create after I left? How many more operators did you break, trying to turn them into monsters? The response was immediate. Breach teams, engage, full suppression protocols authorized. The assault began with surgical precision. Explosive charges detonated against the clinic's reinforced doors, while flashbangs struck through specially, weakened sections of the windows. Under normal circumstances, it would have been devastatingly effective. But the Ghost had spent 5 years preparing this ground. The first breach team entered through the front, only to find themselves caught in a maze of invisible wire barriers. The second team, coming through the back, triggered a series of non-lethal but disorienting countermeasures. Strobe lights, high-frequency sound pulses, and concentrated capsaicin aerosols. Still playing with fear, Artemis noted, her voice carrying a hint of admiration. But you forget, we've studied your methods, improved them. Our operators are conditioned against psychological warfare. Are they? Ray asked softly. Then why are their hands shaking? Why are their heart rates elevated? Why do they hesitate before entering dark rooms? He moved through his clinic like a shadow, using his intimate knowledge of every corner, every sightline. The assault team was good, incredibly good, but they were fighting on his territory, against an enemy who had turned the entire building into a weapon. You're proving our point, Artemis pressed. The protocol works. It could revolutionize warfare, eliminate the need for large-scale military operations. One Ghost could do the work of an entire battalion. At what cost? Ray's voice echoed through the clinic's halls, making the assault team spin uncertainly. How many souls are you willing to sacrifice to create your perfect weapons? He engaged the teams with terrifying efficiency, using their own tactics against them. Years of veterinary work had only made his hands more precise, his movements more economical. Where they expected lethal force, he employed pressure points and nerve strikes. Where they anticipated direct confrontation, he turned their formation against itself. Maria, he called through his secure channel. Status: local police have been alerted, she reported. Real ones this time, state level, 3 minutes out. Harrison? Got everything on video, the older vet confirmed, including their illegal entry and use of military-grade weapons on U.S. soil, already uploaded to secure servers. Ray allowed himself a grim smile behind his mask. Sometimes the most effective weapons weren't guns or fear. They were witnesses and evidence. You hear that, Artemis? He broadcast openly. You've got about 2 minutes before this becomes an international incident. An agency black ops team conducting an illegal operation against a civilian target. The diplomatic fallout would be uncomfortable. There was a long pause, then, "Stand down," Artemis ordered her teams. "Fall back to extraction points." "Not yet," Ray countered. "First, we're going to make a deal." The Ghost does not make deals. No, Ray agreed. But Dr. Ray, Sullivan does, and he's the one you're dealing with now. He outlined his terms quickly. The agency would leave Mesa Roja alone. No more surveillance, no more attempts to restart the Ghost Protocol. In exchange, he would keep his skills buried, using them only to protect his community. And if we refuse? Artemis asked. Then I stop being careful, Ray replied softly. I stop pulling my punches, and I show your teams exactly why the Ghost Protocol was shut down. How many of your operators do you think will still be combat effective after experiencing the full psychological warfare package? Another pause, longer this time. Then, terms accepted. But know this, if you ever use the protocol beyond this territory, I won't, Ray cut her off, because unlike you, I understand what it really is. Not a weapon to be replicated, but a burden to be contained. As the helicopters departed, their sound fading into the desert night, Ray turned to Victor and Vasquez. Both men had watched the encounter with a mixture of fear and awe. Now, he said quietly, about that message you're going to send to Los Sangre. No message needed, Victor replied quickly. This territory, it's yours. Los Sangre will never trouble Mesa Roja again. Not my territory, Ray corrected, removing his mask. These people's territory. I'm just their veterinarian. Vasquez studied him with professional curiosity. How do you do it? Switch between him and you? I don't. Ray's voice was tired but certain. The ghost is still here, always will be, but now he serves a different purpose, not to destroy or dominate, but to protect and heal. As the state police arrived to find a scene of unconscious cartel gunmen and property damage that would never be fully explained, Ray began the process of returning his clinic to normal. Maria and Harrison helped, neither mentioning the incredible events they'd witnessed. You know, Harrison said finally, sweeping up broken glass, most vets just install security systems. Ray actually laughed, the first genuine laugh they'd heard from him in days. Well, this is technically a security system, just a very specialized one. Will they really stay away? Maria asked. Both of them, the cartel and the agency. Yes, Ray replied with certainty, because they finally understand what I learned 5 years ago. The Ghost Protocol isn't about being the most dangerous thing in the dark. It's about choosing what you haunt and why. He looked around his clinic, battered but still standing, just like the community it served. Tomorrow, people will return to their homes. Life would resume its normal rhythm, and the veterinarian would continue his work of healing, knowing that his darker skills now served a greater purpose. Besides, he added softly, sometimes the best way to escape the ghosts of your past is to become one that protects rather than hunts, to haunt the nightmares of those who would harm the innocent rather than the innocent themselves. Dawn broke over Mesa Roja, painting the desert in shades of healing gold. Ray stood in his clinic's treatment room, methodically repairing the damage from the night's events. Each piece of broken equipment he fixed, each surface he cleaned, felt like stepping further back from the shadow of the ghost. The local news was already spinning stories about a failed cartel attack, gang warfare gone wrong, federal operations gone sideways. None of them came close to the truth, which was exactly as Ray had planned. Morning, Doc. Cooper appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this after last night. Ray accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Any movement from our friends? Cartel's gone, pulled out completely before sunrise. Agency assets disappeared like they were never here. Cooper settled into a chair, studying Ray carefully. But you've got visitors coming, different kinds. Before Ray could ask for clarification, he heard vehicles approaching, not the aggressive roar of cartel SUVs or the subtle purr of agency. Vehicles, but the familiar sounds of the town coming back to life. Maria arrived first, carrying boxes of supplies to restock the clinic. She was followed by Harrison, who brought breakfast burritos from his wife. Then came others. Mrs. Garcia with her chihuahua, Mr. Patel from the pharmacy, Deputy Santos trying to pretend he was just making a routine check. They all had excuses for being there. All had reasons that couldn't wait. But Ray saw the truth. In their eyes, they needed to see for themselves that their veterinarian was still there, still the man they knew. "Quite a night," Deputy Santos said casually, watching Ray treat Mrs. Garcia's nervous chihuahua. "Lots of strange reports. Explosions. Gunfire, even talk of helicopters. Really?" Ray's voice gave nothing away as he gently examined the small dog. "I was pretty focused on emergency surgeries, lost track of what was happening outside," Santos nodded, understanding the game. "Course, just like you probably didn't notice the entire Los Sangre operation pulling out of our territory. Word is, Victor Ortega himself ordered it, complete withdrawal." "Good news for local law enforcement," Ray replied mildly. "Good news for everyone," Santos agreed. Then lower. "Thank you. Whatever you did, however you did it, thank you." Ray simply nodded, continuing his examination. But as the deputy turned to leave, he added softly, "Some things are worth protecting." The morning continued with a steady stream of visitors, each bringing their own small confirmations that Mesa Roja was returning to normal. But there was something else too. A new awareness in how they looked at Ray, a deeper respect that went beyond appreciation for a skilled veterinarian. "They know something's different," Maria observed during a quiet moment. "Not the details, but they sense it." "Does it bother them?" Ray asked, genuinely concerned. "Are you kidding?" She smiled. "They love it, their gentle vet who stood up to the cartel and won. You're going to be a local legend." "That's what I'm afraid of," Ray sighed. "Legends draw attention." "Different kinds of attention now," Cooper interjected. "Watch." A truck pulled up outside, and Diego stepped out carrying a familiar French bulldog puppy. The young man's face showed a mixture of gratitude and awe as he entered the clinic. "The specialist said she's doing great," Diego reported, letting Ray examine the puppy. "Said it was a miracle we got her there in time." Ray checked the surgical site with gentle fingers. "Good, clean work. She'll need follow-up care, but she should make a full recovery." That's not the only reason I'm here," Diego admitted. "After what happened, after seeing how I want to learn, not just about being a vet, but about being the kind of man who stands up for what's right." Ray studied the young man carefully. He saw something there, a spark of the same desire that had once driven him to become more than just a soldier, to become something that could make a real difference. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Medicine never is. And the other lessons, they come with their own costs." "I understand," Diego replied firmly. "But I've seen both sides now, the cartel's way and yours. I know which path I want to follow." Before Ray could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Winters. "Tehran. Situation contained. Agency backing off. But there's something else you need to know. Assets moving in your direction. Different kind. Worse." Ray's jaw tightened. Of course it wouldn't be that simple. One threat eliminated only meant space for another to emerge. "Maria," he called out, "get me everything you can on unusual activity. Within a 100-mile radius. Harrison, we need to—" He stopped, realizing Diego was still watching. This was the moment of choice. Continue pretending to be just a veterinarian, or accept that his two worlds had permanently merged. "Actually," he said finally, "Diego, how would you like to learn about more than just veterinary medicine?" The young man's eyes lit up. I mean that every skill can be used to heal or harm. The choice lies in how we apply them." Ray gestured to his clinic, to the community gathering outside. "These people, this town, they've given me a chance to use my abilities for something pure. Something right, like a guardian," Diego suggested. "No," Ray corrected gently. "Like a healer who remembers that sometimes healing requires strength, that sometimes the gentlest hands need to be the strongest." Cooper nodded approvingly. Ghost. Protocol repurposed, not for war or fear, but for protection and healing. Exactly. Ray turned back to Diego. Still interested? When do we start? We already have. Ray handed him a medical textbook. First rule, learn the basics. Everything else builds on that foundation. As Diego settled in to study, Ray moved through his clinic with renewed purpose. The ghost would always be part of him, but now that aspect of his nature served a greater cause. The skills that had once brought terror would now bring security. The shadows he'd tried to escape would become a shield for those who needed protection. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Winters. You should know, Tehran wasn't just about the protocol. There were other projects, darker ones. Some of them are waking up. Ray deleted the message without responding. Whatever was coming, he would face it as both the healer and the warrior he had become, and this time he wouldn't face it alone. Doc, Maria called from the front desk. Got some unusual patterns showing up, military channels going dark along the border, satellite coverage being redirected. Multiple vehicles spotted on back roads, Harrison added. Not a cartel, not an agency, different signatures entirely. Ray nodded, feeling the familiar tactical awareness rising. But now it was tempered by something else, not just the cold. Calculation of the ghost, but the protective instinct of a healer defending his home. Cooper, he called out. Time to unlock the rest of the storage unit. The ghost protocols weren't the only things I put away 5 years ago. The former Marine grinned. Finally, been wondering when you'd want to access the heavy equipment. Heavy equipment. Diego looked up from his textbook. What kind of veterinarian has heavy equipment? The kind who understands that healing sometimes requires more than just medicine, Ray replied. The kind who knows that to protect life, you have to be prepared to face anything that threatens it. He looked around his clinic, at Maria's determined focus, Harrison's quiet strength, Cooper's professional readiness, and Diego's eager desire to learn. This was what the agency had never understood about the Ghost Protocol. It wasn't meant to be a weapon of fear, but a tool of justice. Not a way to break men's spirits, but to break the power of those who would harm the innocent. Whatever's coming, he said quietly. Mesa Roja is ready, because now it has more than just a ghost in the shadows. It has a community willing to stand together, and a healer who remembers how to fight. The sun climbed higher over the desert town, its light pushing back the shadows, but not eliminating them entirely. In those shadows, a legend was being reborn, not as a nightmare whispered about in dark places, but as a guardian who understood that true strength lies in choosing how to use one's power. The ghost of Mesa Roja was no longer just a shadow, to be feared. He was a healer who had learned to embrace both the light and the darkness, using each to serve the cause of protecting those who needed him most. Sunset painted Mesa Roja's clouds in shades of crimson as Ray finished reviewing the surveillance data Maria had collected. The patterns were unmistakable. Systematic communications, blackouts, coordinated vehicle movements, and a complete absence of normal Border Patrol chatter. 3 convoys, Cooper reported, marking positions on their makeshift tactical map. Moving in from different directions, all avoiding main roads, professional, disciplined. Not a cartel, Harrison observed. Not agency either. These people know how to stay invisible. Ray studied the data with the focused intensity that had once made him legendary. They're herding us, he said finally. Cutting off escape routes. Isolating the town. Classic infiltration tactics. But why? Maria asked. The cartel's gone. The agency backed off. What could be worse? Tehran wasn't just about psychological warfare, Ray replied grimly. The Ghost Protocol was only part of a larger project. They were creating other types of operators, different kinds of shadows. Diego looked up from the medical texts he'd been studying. What kinds? The kind that make the ghost look gentle. Ray's voice carried the weight of old memories. We called them the Wraiths. While the Ghost Protocol focused on fear and psychological manipulation, the Wraiths were something else entirely. They were designed to be perfect predators. I thought you were Delta Force, Diego said, confused. I was, but before that, before the Ghost Protocol, I was part of something else, a program called Black Dawn. We were testing experimental combat enhancement procedures, trying to create super soldiers. Cooper's eyes widened with recognition. The Kurdistan incident, that was you? Ray nodded slowly. 37 enhanced operators went rogue. Only 3 of us stayed loyal. I helped hunt them down and saw what the program had turned them into. That's why I chose the Ghost Protocol instead. Better to use fear as a weapon than become something inhuman. And now they're coming here? Maria's voice shook slightly. Some of them. Ray moved to the clinic's back room, unlocking a hidden panel. The program was officially shut down, but pieces of it survived, went darker, deeper. He pulled out a heavy case, one that hadn't been opened in 5 years. Inside lay specialized equipment, cutting-edge body armor, advanced optical systems, and weapons that looked more experimental than military. I kept these as insurance, he explained, checking each piece, hoping I'd never need them. The Wraiths aren't like other operators. They're stronger, faster, enhanced both physically and mentally. But the procedures that created them also stripped away their humanity. How do we fight something like that? Harrison asked. We don't, Ray replied. Not directly. The Ghost Protocol exists for a reason. You can't outfight a perfect predator, but you can outsmart one. Make it fear the dark more than you do. He began distributing equipment, showing each team member how to use the specialized gear. Cooper, take Harrison and set up the long-range surveillance network. Maria, start evacuating anyone who isn't essential to the defense. Diego, I'm staying, the young man said firmly. Ray studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good. You've got the steadiest hands besides mine. I'll need them. As his team moved to their tasks, Ray's phone buzzed one final time. The message was from an unknown number. The Wraiths remember you, Ghost. They remember Kurdistan. This time, there will be no survivors. They're wrong about that, Ray muttered, deleting the message. This time, I'm not fighting to destroy. I'm fighting to protect. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Ray moved through his clinic with mechanical precision, transforming the healing space into a defensive position. But unlike the previous night's preparations, these were different, designed not just to confuse and terrify, but to counter superhuman abilities. UV strobes on all approaches, he instructed. The Wraiths have enhanced vision, bright lights, hurt them more than normal operators. Sonic deterrence at these frequencies. He handed Cooper a data pad. Their enhanced hearing makes them vulnerable to specific tones. What about their strength? Diego asked, helping to set up medical stations. Their speed? That's where psychology comes in. Ray's voice turned grimmer. The procedures that enhanced them also amplified their fear responses. They feel terror more intensely than normal humans. We use that. The Ghost Protocol, a modified version. The Wraiths are predators. They hunt by instinct. But when a predator becomes prey... He let the sentence hang. Maria returned from her evacuation duties. Town's mostly clear. Those who stayed are in the designated safe zones. But Ray, there's something else. The air feels wrong. Ray nodded. They're already here. Watching. Waiting. The Wraiths always study their target before striking. How long? Cooper asked, checking his equipment. Not long. They're patient, but their enhanced metabolism means they can't wait too long between feeding. Feeding? Diego's voice cracked slightly. Another side effect of the procedures. They need regular doses of specific proteins to maintain their enhancements. Usually, they get them from... Ray paused. Let's just say there's a reason they leave no survivors. The sun had fully set now, leaving Mesa Roja in darkness. But it wasn't. The natural darkness of a desert night. This darkness felt alive, predatory, as if the shadows themselves were hungry. "They're moving," Cooper reported, checking the thermal feeds. "3 teams, just like we predicted. But something's wrong with their signatures. They're too cold." "Temperature regulation," Ray explained. "Helps them operate in any environment, makes them harder to track." He switched on his tactical display. "Everyone remember your positions. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, stick to the plan." "What exactly is the plan?" Harrison asked. "We turn their nature against them. The Wraiths are perfect predators, but they've forgotten something important, something their enhancements stripped away." "What's that?" "Mercy," Ray replied softly. "Compassion, the things that make us human. And sometimes being human is the greatest strength of all." The first attack came without warning. One moment the street was empty. The next 3 figures stood in plain view, their movements too fluid to be natural, their forms seeming to shift and ripple in the darkness. "Hold positions," Ray ordered as his team tensed. "Let them make the first move." The Wraiths moved forward with inhuman grace, their tactical gear more advanced than anything the agency had fielded. Their faces were hidden behind sleek masks, but their body language screamed predator, ghost. The lead Wraith's voice was a distorted hiss. "Kurdistan left scars. Time to finish what we started." "You never understood, did you?" Ray replied calmly. "Kurdistan wasn't about hunting you down. It was about trying to save what was left of your humanity." "Humanity is weakness." Another Wraith snarled. "The procedures made us perfect." "Perfect?" Ray's voice carried across the empty street. "Perfect predators don't feel fear. Perfect killers don't remember their nightmares. Tell me, do you still dream about Kurdistan? About what happened in the dark?" The lead Wraith's stance shifted slightly, a tell that would have been invisible to normal observers, but spoke volumes to Ray. "Trying your mind games, Ghost. We're immune now." "Are you?" Ray activated the first set of countermeasures. UV lights blazed to life, making the Wraiths hiss in pain. "Because your bodies are remembering things your minds tried to forget. The price of perfection. The cost of playing God." The Wraiths moved with blinding speed, splitting up to attack from multiple angles. But Ray had expected this. The Ghost Protocol hadn't just been about fear. It had been about understanding how the mind worked, even an enhanced mind. "Now," he commanded. His team executed their roles flawlessly. Cooper triggered the sonic deterrents, flooding the area with frequencies that targeted the Wraith's enhanced senses. Maria activated the strobing patterns designed to disrupt their superior vision. Harrison released the chemical compounds that would play havoc with their enhanced smell. The Wraiths faltered, their perfect coordination disrupted by sensory overload. But they were far from defeated. If anything, the assault made them more dangerous, like wounded predators becoming more lethal. "You think this will stop us?" The lead Wraith's voice was thick with rage. "We are beyond pain, beyond fear." "No," Ray replied softly. "You're not beyond anything. You're trapped in it. The procedures didn't make you perfect. They made you prisoners in your own enhanced bodies. Always hungry, always hunting, never knowing peace." He stepped into view, his ghost mask in place but somehow different now. Not a tool of terror, but a symbol of protection. "I could have become like you," he continued. "Could have taken the full enhancement protocol. But I chose a different path. Chose to remember what makes us human." The Wraiths attacked as one, their movements almost too fast to follow. But Ray had spent 5 years honing different skills, precision rather than power, healing rather than hurting. He moved through their assault like water through rocks, each motion efficient and precise. Where they struck to kill, he struck to disable. Where they sought to destroy, he sought to contain. It was a dance of opposing philosophies, their pursuit of lethal perfection against his integration of strength and mercy. "This isn't Kurdistan," he told them between strikes. "I'm not here to hunt you. I'm here to show you another way." There is no other way. The lead wraith's attacks became more frenzied. The hunger, the need, it never stops. "Because you're fighting it wrong?" Ray replied, dodging a blow that would have shattered concrete. "The procedures changed your bodies, but they didn't have to change your souls." He moved with practiced precision, his medical knowledge combining with combat experience to target pressure points and nerve clusters, even through their enhanced physiologies. 5 years ago, I chose to heal rather than hurt, to protect rather than destroy. His voice carried over the sound of combat. The Ghost Protocol wasn't about fear. It was about understanding. Understanding that true strength comes from choosing how to use our power. The Wraith's attacks began to slow, their enhanced bodies betraying them as Ray's precisely targeted strikes took effect. But it was his words that seemed to hit hardest, reaching past their conditioning to something that remained human. "There's another way," he told them as they struggled to maintain their assault. "A way to use your strength to protect instead of destroy, to be more than what they made you." The lead wraith faltered, his mask cracking to reveal a face twisted by enhancement procedures, but still recognizably human. How do you fight the hunger?" "By remembering what you're fighting for," Ray replied softly. "By choosing to be more than just a perfect predator." The battle's outcome hung in the balance as the wraiths faced a choice: continue their assault or listen to the possibility of another path. In that moment, Ray saw what he had seen in Kurdistan years ago, not monsters, but lost souls trapped, in bodies that had been turned into weapons. "Let me help you," he offered, lowering his guard, not as the ghost, not as an operator, but as a healer, someone who understands what it means to carry darkness and still choose light. The night held its breath, waiting to see if mercy could triumph over conditioning, if healing could overcome the drive to destroy. And in that moment, Ray Sullivan stood ready to either fight or heal, knowing that sometimes they were one and the same. The night air crackled with tension as Ray faced the wraiths, his offer of help hanging between them like a lifeline. The lead wraith's mask had cracked completely now, revealing a face that showed the toll of the enhancement procedures. Skin stretched too tight over augmented muscles, veins pulsing with chemical cocktails, eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. "You don't understand," the wraith growled, but his voice carried something new, uncertainty. "The hunger, it's not just physical, it's like a void inside, always demanding more." "I do understand," Ray replied softly. "Why do you think I chose the Ghost Protocol instead? I saw what the full enhancement procedures did, saw how they didn't just change bodies, but consumed souls." The other wraiths circled warily, their movements still predatory but lacking their earlier coordination. Ray's targeted strikes had disrupted the chemical balance that kept their enhancements stable. "Marcus." Ray addressed the lead wraith by his old name, making him flinch. "Remember Kurdistan? Remember why I didn't kill you then?" "You were weak." Marcus snarled, but his enhanced body trembled slightly. "No, I saw something in you. All of you. Something that survived the procedures. A spark of humanity they couldn't quite erase." From their positions around the clinic, Ray's team maintained their defensive measures, but now they were calibrated differently. Not to harm, but to help break through the wraith's conditioning. "It's impossible," one of the other wraiths spoke, her distorted voice carrying echoes of desperation. "The hunger can't be controlled, the need to hunt, to feed." "Sarah." Maria's voice came suddenly through Ray's earpiece. "Sarah Chen, from the original Black Dawn trials." Ray tensed slightly. Of course Maria would have done research after learning about his past. "Yes," he confirmed quietly. "Dr. Sarah Chen. She..." Was our chief medical officer before they decided researchers made good test subjects, Sarah finished bitterly. Before they decided we needed to experience the procedures firsthand. The third Wraith remained silent, but his stance had changed, becoming less aggressive, more uncertain. Ray recognized him too. David Torres, former Delta Force, one of the strongest opponents of the enhancement program until they'd forced him into it. Listen to me, Ray urged them. The procedures changed your bodies, yes. Created needs that seem impossible to control. But I've spent 5 years learning something important. The difference between healing and hurting, between controlling power and being controlled by it. Pretty words, Marcus growled, but he made no move to attack. Words don't fill the void, don't quiet the hunger. No, Ray agreed, but understanding does. Knowledge, the very things they took from you when they turned you into weapons. He gestured to his clinic. You know what I've been doing these past 5 years? Learning how bodies work, how to heal them, how to help them find balance. Your enhanced physiologies aren't curses, they're just systems out of alignment. Sarah's posture shifted slightly, her scientific mind engaging despite the procedures. The protein requirements, they told us they were permanent, that we'd always need. They lied, Ray cut her off. The hunger isn't about feeding, it's about maintaining the chemical balance they use to control you. But there are other ways to achieve that balance. Prove it, Marcus demanded. Ray reached slowly into his tactical vest, removing a small case. Inside were 3 auto-injectors filled with a pale blue liquid, synthesized from my own research. A compound designed to help stabilize enhanced metabolisms without suppressing the improvements. You've been preparing for this, David spoke for the first time, his voice rough from disuse. All these years. I never stopped trying to find a way to help you, Ray confirmed. The Ghost Protocol wasn't just about hunting enhanced operators, it was about understanding how to save them. He held out the injectors. Your choice. Continue being what they made you, or take a step toward becoming something else. Something that uses enhancement for protection instead of predation. The Wraiths exchanged glances, their enhanced senses allowing them to communicate without words. Years of conditioning and chemical dependency warred against the possibility of freedom. It could be a trick, Marcus warned. More Ghost Protocol manipulation. Could be, Ray agreed calmly. But ask yourselves, why would I trick you when I've already proven I can disable you? Why offer help unless I genuinely want to give it? Sarah moved first, her scientific training overriding her conditioning. The compound, it's based on neural stabilizers, isn't it? Combined with metabolic regulators. And targeted protein synthesis catalysts, Ray nodded, designed to work with your enhancements instead of fighting them. She took one of the injectors, examining it with enhanced vision. The molecular structure, it's elegant. How did you... I had help, Ray gestured to his team. Maria's background in veterinary pharmacology, Harrison's combat medicine experience, even Cooper's knowledge of military enhancement programs. 5 years of research, trying to find a way to free you from what they did. David stepped forward next, his military training allowing him to recognize the truth in Ray's words. You're not just offering a cure, you're offering a purpose. Yes, Ray confirmed, the same purpose I found, using our abilities to protect instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm. Marcus remained tense, fighting against hope itself. And if it doesn't work? If the hunger comes back? Then you'll have somewhere to come, Ray replied simply. Someone who understands. A community that accepts both the light and dark within us. The lead Wraith studied Ray for a long moment, his enhanced senses seeking any sign of deception. Why? After Kurdistan, after everything, why help us? Because 5 years ago I made a choice between being a weapon and being a healer. Now I'm offering you the same choice. Slowly, Marcus reached for the final injector, As he did, Ray saw something in his enhanced eyes, a glimmer of the man he had been before the procedures, the soldier who had once fought to protect others. The injections took effect quickly, their carefully designed compounds working to stabilize the wraiths. Enhanced systems. Ray watched closely, monitoring their vital signs with both medical precision and tactical awareness. "The hunger," Sarah gasped. "It's different, not gone, but manageable," David finished, "like strength instead of compulsion." Marcus straightened up, his movements still enhanced, but now carrying a different quality, control instead of desperate predation. "How long will it last?" "The compounds are designed to help your bodies produce their own stabilizing agents," Ray explained. "With regular treatment and monitoring, you can maintain the balance indefinitely." "And in return?" Marcus asked, old suspicion dying hard. "In return, you choose what you become next. The enhancements are tools, nothing more. Tools that can be used to protect as easily as to destroy." The night seemed to hold its breath as the wraiths faced their moment of choice. Then Sarah removed her mask completely, letting her true face show. "I was a doctor once," she said quietly. "Before they turned me into this, maybe I could be one again." "My clinic could use someone with your expertise," Ray offered. "Especially someone who understands both traditional and enhanced medicine." David followed suit, his mask falling, a way to reveal features that were still military sharp, but no longer inhuman. "A protector instead of a predator," he mused. "It's been a long time since I felt like I was guarding something instead of hunting it." Finally, Marcus reached up to remove his mask. The face beneath was scarred by more than just procedures. It carried the weight of years spent fighting against his own nature. "You really think we can change after everything we've done?" "I think we can choose to be more than what others tried to make us," Ray replied. "I think true strength lies not in denying our darkness, but in choosing how to use it." The sun began to rise over Mesa Roja, painting the desert in colors of hope and healing. As its light touched the scene, it revealed not monsters or predators, but wounded warriors taking their first steps toward redemption. "It won't be easy," Ray warned them. "The path of healing never is, but you won't walk it alone." Maria stepped forward, her initial fear replaced by professional interest. "The compound will need regular monitoring, adjustments based on individual responses, and the ghost protocol can be adapted," Harrison added, "used to help control enhanced abilities rather than just inspire fear." "A new kind of special forces," Cooper suggested, "one that protects through understanding instead of just power." Diego, who had watched the entire confrontation with wide eyes, finally spoke. "So the clinic gets 3 new staff members. That's going to require updating the sign." The simple observation broke the last of the tension. Even Marcus managed a small smile, an expression that transformed his enhanced features from threatening to almost gentle. "Mesa Roja Veterinary Services," David read the clinic's sign, "specializing in all kinds of healing." "All kinds indeed," Ray agreed softly, "because sometimes the deepest wounds aren't physical. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with strength, but with the courage to choose a different path." As his team began helping the former wraiths settle into their new reality, Ray looked out over his town, a place that had given a ghost a chance to become a healer and now offered the same opportunity to others seeking redemption. The sun climbed higher, pushing back shadows, but not eliminating them entirely. In that balance of light and dark, a new chapter was beginning, one where enhanced predators could become protectors, where weapons could be transformed into tools of healing, and where the ghosts of the past could find purpose in guarding the future. A month had passed since the night the wraiths came to Mesa Roja. The town had settled into a new rhythm, one that acknowledged the extraordinary while maintaining its essential character. The clinic had expanded both in size and purpose, becoming something unique in the border region. Ray stood at his familiar position behind the examination table, carefully checking a German shepherd's injured leg. The dog belonged to the local school, a therapy animal that helped children cope with trauma. As he worked, he could hear Sarah in the next room, her enhanced senses allowing her to detect issues that normal medical equipment might miss. "The muscle structure is healing well," she called out, "but there's minor inflammation in the secondary tendons." "Notice that," Ray replied, making careful adjustments to his treatment. Enhanced perception has its advantages in veterinary medicine. The dog's handler, a teacher named Lisa Martinez, watched with fascination. Like most of the town, she knew something had changed at the clinic, but the details remained comfortably vague. She just knew that the local veterinary practice had become remarkably effective at healing even the most difficult cases. "I don't know how you do it," she said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "A month ago, they said he'd never walk properly again." "Good medicine," Ray replied simply. "And good help." As if to emphasize his point, David walked past the open door, carrying supplies with enhanced ease. The former wraith had taken to clinic security with the same intensity he'd once brought to hunting, but now his strength protected rather than he threatened. The peaceful scene was interrupted by Cooper's arrival. The former Marine's expression told Ray everything he needed to know before he spoke. "We need to talk," Cooper said quietly. "All of us." Ray nodded, finishing his treatment of the therapy dog. "Lisa, we're done here. Same time next week for a follow-up?" After she left, Ray's team gathered in the back office: Maria, Harrison, Cooper, and the 3 former wraiths. The room had been modified to accommodate their unique needs, with special lighting and sound dampening to help manage their enhanced senses. "Word from my contacts," Cooper began without preamble. "The agency isn't as done with us as we thought. They've been watching, evaluating." "Evaluating what?" Marcus asked, his enhanced frame tense but controlled. The stabilizing treatments had worked better than anyone hoped, allowing the wraiths to maintain their abilities while managing the psychological effects. "The integration," Cooper replied. "How enhanced operators can function as part of a community. They're calling it the Mesa Roja model." "They want to replicate it," Sarah realized, her scientific mind racing ahead. "Use what we've achieved here as a template for other programs." "More than that," Ray said quietly. "They want to understand how a ghost and 3 wraiths became protectors instead of weapons. How we found a way to use our abilities for healing." Maria pulled up data on her tablet. "We've had observers, disguised as patients, travelers, even delivery personnel, all gathering data on our operations. Let them observe," David suggested. "Let them see that there's another way." But Ray shook his head slowly. "It's not that simple. The agency doesn't want to help enhanced operators integrate. They want to create controllable assets. They'll take what we've built here and twist it into something else, like they did with the Ghost Protocol," Harrison added. "Like they did with the Wraith program." The room fell silent as they considered the implications. Everything they'd built, everything they'd achieved in turning abilities meant for destruction toward healing, could be perverted into new forms of warfare. "So what do we do?" Diego asked from his position by the door. The young man had grown considerably over the past month, learning not just veterinary medicine, but also the complexities of dealing with enhanced abilities. Ray stood, moving to the window that overlooked his town. Mesa Roja had changed too, becoming something unique, a place where the extraordinary served the ordinary, where healing took precedence over power. "We do what we've always done," he said finally. "We protect, we heal, we show through our actions that there's a better way to use power than just accumulating it." "They won't accept that," Marcus warned. "The agency doesn't handle rejection well." "No," Ray agreed. "They don't. Which is why we need to give them something else to think about. He turned back to his team, his expression carrying the calm certainty that had made him legendary as the Ghost. Cooper, what else did your contacts say about other enhanced operators? Out there, the former Marine consulted his notes. At least a dozen confirmed, possibly more, all struggling with the same issues we faced: chemical dependency, psychological conditioning, the need to hunt. And now they know there's an alternative, Sarah added. Word will spread through the enhanced community. Others will come seeking help. Exactly, Ray nodded. The agency can't stop what's already started. Every enhanced operator who chooses healing over hunting, protection over predation, weakens their control. A different kind of ghost protocol, David realized. Not using fear to break enemies, but using hope to free them. The idea hung in the air, full of both promise and danger. They all understood the risks. The agency wouldn't simply allow their enhanced assets to slip away, to choose their own path. We'll need to expand, Maria said practically. The clinic's already at capacity. And improve our security, Harrison added. Both physical and digital. Create a real sanctuary, Sarah suggested, her enhanced mind already working on solutions. A place where others like us can learn to control their abilities, to use them for healing instead of harm. Marcus stood, his enhanced frame no longer, projecting menace but protection. They'll try to stop us. The agency, other organizations that want to control enhanced operators. They'll all see us as a threat. Good, Ray replied simply. Let them come, because now they'll face something they've never encountered before. Enhanced operators who've chosen to protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm. He moved to a cabinet, removing a familiar black mask, the symbol of the Ghost. But now it represented something different, something more than just fear and shadow. 5 years ago, I chose to become a healer instead of a weapon, he said quietly. Now we're offering that same choice to others. The agency can observe all they want, try to replicate our methods, but they'll never understand the most important component. Which is, Diego asked. Free will, Ray replied. The choice to use power for protection rather than dominance. They can create enhanced operators, but they can't force them to remain weapons once they know there's another path. The team spent the next hours planning, each member contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. Maria's organizational skills, Harrison's medical knowledge, Cooper's tactical experience, and the enhanced abilities of the former Wraiths all came together to create something new, a framework for helping others like them find redemption through healing. As night fell over Mesa Roja, Ray stood on the clinic's roof, watching his town settle into its evening routine. From this vantage point, he could see the subtle signs of enhanced security: David's patrols, Sarah's sensor networks, Marcus's observation posts. But he could also see the more important signs: the lights of homes where people felt safe, the parks where children played without fear, the streets where ordinary life continued under extraordinary protection. Quite a change from a month ago, Cooper said, joining him on the roof, when you were just a vet with a secret. Still am, Ray replied, just with better help now. The agency won't give up easily, Cooper warned. They'll see this sanctuary idea as a direct challenge. Let them. Ray's voice carried absolute certainty, because every time they move against us, every time they try to maintain control, they'll just drive more enhanced operators to seek us out, to choose healing over hunting. He touched the mask at his belt, feeling the weight of both past and future. The Ghost Protocol was about using fear to defeat enemies. But there's something more powerful than fear: hope. The hope of redemption, of using power to protect instead of destroy. Below them, the clinic continued its evening operations. Through the windows, they could see Sarah using her enhanced senses to diagnose a complex case. David gently handling nervous animals with his controlled strength. Marcus teaching Diego about enhanced perception and control. A new kind of special forces, Cooper mused. One that specializes in saving rather than destroying. More than that, Ray corrected quietly. A new kind of healing. One that understands that sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we carry. Inside, the ones that come from being turned into something we never wanted to be. He looked out over his town, his home, and felt the rightness of what they were building. The agency could observe and analyze all they wanted, but they'd never replicate what made Mesa Roja special. They'd never understand that true power doesn't come from control or enhancement, but from the choice to use whatever abilities you have in service of others. The silent healer, Cooper said thoughtfully. That's what they're calling you now. In certain circles, the ghost who learned to heal instead of hunt, Ray smiled slightly. Good, because that's the real message we're sending, that no matter what you've been turned into, no matter what abilities you possess, you always have a choice about how to use them. The night settled around them, bringing with it not darkness, to fear, but shadows to protect. In Mesa Roja, those shadows now served a greater purpose, offering sanctuary to those who sought to turn their enhanced abilities toward healing, toward protection, toward hope. The first signs of dawn were just touching Mesa Roja's horizon when Ray received the alert. A perimeter sensor had been activated, detecting the approach of two individuals with enhanced biosignatures. This wasn't unusual anymore. In the past month, word had spread through the enhanced community about the sanctuary taking shape in a small border town. Getting readings now, Sarah reported from her monitoring station. One male, one female. Their enhancements are different, not Wraith Protocol, something else. Ray studied the sensor data, noting the unique patterns. Chimera program, he said quietly. They were trying to combine different enhancement types. How bad? Marcus asked, his own enhanced senses already tracking the newcomers. Bad enough that the program was shut down even before Black Dawn. The survival rate was under 10%. Ray checked his equipment. David, Cooper, establish containment positions. Maria, prep the stabilization compounds. These ones might be volatile. The two figures emerged from the pre-dawn shadows, like wraiths themselves, but their movements were wrong. Jerky, almost spasmodic, as if their enhanced bodies were fighting against themselves. The woman's skin showed patches of scales or armor, while the man's muscles seemed to shift and flow beneath his skin. Please, the woman called out, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible. We heard there was help here. Ray stepped into view, deliberately non-threatening but ready to move if needed. I'm Dr. Sullivan. This is a sanctuary for enhanced operators seeking another way. The man twitched violently, his form seeming to blur. The hunger. It's different from what they said, not just protein needs, but genetic instability. Sarah finished, her enhanced senses and medical training combining to make the diagnosis. The Chimera protocols tried to incorporate multiple enhancement types. It made the subjects incredibly powerful, but at a terrible cost. We're dying, the woman said simply. Our bodies are tearing themselves apart. But we heard there was a ghost who became a healer, who found a way to stabilize the wraiths. Ray studied them carefully, noting the signs of deterioration. The Chimera program had been ambitious, trying to create operators with multiple enhancement types, but human DNA could only be pushed so far before it began to break down. Julia. Chen, the woman introduced herself, former CDC virologist. This is Michael Ross, ex-Navy SEAL. We're the last survivors of Chimera Group 6. How many groups were there? Maria asked softly. 12, Michael answered, his form continuing to shift uncomfortably. 60 operators total. We're all that's left. The implications hung heavy in the morning air. 58 enhanced operators dead from their own augmentations. The agency's drive for the perfect weapon had created only perfect tragedy. The stabilization compounds won't work on them, Sarah said, reviewing their readings. Their genetic structure is too unstable. The standard treatments would only accelerate the breakdown. Then we try something else, Ray replied firmly. Their enhancements are different, so we adapt. That's what healing is about, understanding each case, each patient, as unique. He approached the Chimera operators slowly. We can help you, but you need to understand something first. This isn't just about stabilizing your conditions. It's about choosing a different path. What path? Julia asked, her scaled skin catching. The first real rays of sunrise. We're weapons. They made us into weapons. No, Ray corrected gently. They tried to make you into weapons. But you're here, seeking help. That was your choice. And choices are what define us, not our abilities. Michael's shifting form stilled slightly. You really think you can help us? The best scientists in the program couldn't stop the deterioration. The best scientists were trying to preserve weapons, Sarah interjected, moving forward. We're trying to heal people. There's a difference. Over the next hours, the clinic became a hive of activity. Sarah and Ray worked together, combining his experience with stabilization compounds and her enhanced ability to analyze biological systems. Maria coordinated with Harrison on treatment protocols, while David and Marcus maintained security. Their genetic structure is fascinating, Sarah reported, studying tissue samples. The multiple enhancements created a kind of cascade effect. Each new ability amplified the others, but also accelerated the breakdown. Can we reverse it? Ray asked, reviewing the data. Not entirely. But Sarah's enhanced mind worked through calculations faster than any computer. If we modify the stabilization compound to work with their genetic drift instead of fighting it, a dynamic treatment protocol. Ray nodded, understanding. Don't try to fix the instability, but help their bodies adapt to it. Diego, who had been observing and learning, spoke up. Like treating an autoimmune condition, working with the body's changes instead of against them? Exactly, Sarah smiled approvingly. The Chimera protocols basically turned their bodies against themselves, but if we can help them find a new balance. The work was intense, demanding everything they had learned about both enhanced physiology and conventional medicine. But slowly, gradually, they began to see results. The genetic drift is slowing, Sarah reported after their first treatment attempt. Their bodies are starting to find a new equilibrium. Julia and Michael's conditions began to stabilize, though not in the way traditional medicine would recognize. Their enhancements remained, but became more controlled, more integrated. The constant pain of genetic breakdown eased, replaced by a new awareness of their transformed bodies. How do you feel? Ray asked them after a week of treatments. Different, Julia replied, examining her scaled skin, now a stable pattern rather than a chaotic spread. Like I'm finally inhabiting my own body instead of fighting it. Michael nodded, his form now shifting only when he chose to. The hunger is still there, but it's changed. Not a desperate need anymore, more like awareness. Power that can be directed. That's the key, Ray explained. Enhancement isn't about becoming something else entirely. It's about integrating what you've been given, choosing how to use it. But use it for what? Julia asked. We were designed as weapons. Our abilities are meant for combat, for whatever you choose, Ray cut her off gently. Look around this clinic. Sarah uses her enhanced senses to diagnose conditions no normal doctor could detect. David's strength lets him handle injured animals that would be too dangerous otherwise. Marcus's combat abilities now protect instead of destroy. He gestured to the town beyond the clinic's windows. This sanctuary isn't about erasing what was done to you. It's about choosing what you do with it. As if to emphasize his point, an emergency case arrived. A local rancher's horse, severely injured in an accident. The entire team moved into action, their enhanced abilities working in concert to save the animal's life. Julia and Michael watched in amazement as Sarah's enhanced senses detected internal bleeding, while David's controlled strength helped position the injured horse. Marcus's combat awareness helped predict and prevent the panicked animal's movements, while Ray's steady hands performed the necessary procedures. "This is what you meant," Julia said quietly afterward, "about using power to heal instead of harm." "It's a choice we make every day," Ray replied. "Every time we use our abilities, we choose what kind of enhanced operators we want to be, what kind of people we want to be." The sun had risen fully now, another day beginning in Mesa Roja, but for the two Chimera operators, it felt like the first real dawn they'd seen since their enhancement. "Will you stay?" Ray asked them. "The sanctuary can use people with your abilities, your experience, especially now that you're learning to control them." Julia and Michael exchanged glances, their enhanced forms no longer showing signs of distress or deterioration. "You're building something here," Michael said thoughtfully. "Not just a clinic or a sanctuary, but a new way of thinking about enhancement, about power." "Yes," Ray agreed simply, "because someone has to show that there's another path, that being enhanced doesn't mean being a weapon." "The agency won't like that," Julia warned. "They're already watching, evaluating. When they realize you can stabilize, even Chimera protocols, let them watch," Ray replied calmly. "Let them see what happens when enhanced operators choose healing over hurting, protection over predation. Maybe some of them will learn something." The morning continued, full of the normal activities of a veterinary clinic mixed with the extraordinary abilities of its enhanced staff. But now there was something new, a sense of expanding possibility, of horizons widening. "You know what this means," Cooper said quietly to Ray during a quiet moment. "Word will spread about the Chimeras too. Others will come, not just wraiths, but every type of enhanced operator seeking help." "Good," Ray replied, watching his growing team work together. "Because everyone that comes here, everyone that chooses healing over hunting, proves that enhancement doesn't have to mean destruction. That the most powerful choice isn't in how we fight, but in how we heal." The ghost's mask sat in its case, no longer a symbol of fear, but a reminder of transformation. In Mesa Roja, shadows now served the light, and even the most dangerous powers could be turned toward protection and healing. 1 year had passed since the night Los Sangre made the deadly mistake of threatening the wrong veterinarian. Mesa Roja had changed, not dramatically in appearance, but profoundly in purpose. The small border town had become something unique, a place where extraordinary abilities served ordinary healing, where former weapons found peace in protection. Ray stood at his familiar position in the clinic, treating a farmer's goat, while Sarah used her enhanced senses to monitor its vital signs. Through the window, he could see David teaching Diego advanced medical procedures, their enhanced strength and precision now perfectly controlled. Marcus and Michael patrolled the perimeter, their different enhancement types complementing each other, while Julia used her specialized abilities to develop new treatment protocols. "Quite a family you've built," Cooper observed, entering with his daily security report. 27 enhanced operators now, all choosing to heal rather than hurt. "Not just operators anymore," Ray corrected gently. "Healers, protectors, people who've chosen to use their abilities for something greater than violence." The clinic had expanded, both physically and in purpose. New buildings had risen around the original structure, creating a true sanctuary where enhanced individuals could learn to control their abilities, to channel their power toward healing. The agency still watched, still evaluated, but they'd learned to keep their distance. The sight of so many enhanced operators choosing a different path had given them pause. "Got word from our contacts," Cooper continued. 3 more coming in. Next week. Different program, different enhancements, same story. Looking for another way." Ray nodded, finishing his treatment of the goat. "We'll be ready. We always are." Maria appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Ray, your 4 o'clock is here. The Thompson kid's new puppy." As if to emphasize how much had changed, Ray watched his team seamlessly shift roles. Sarah moved to assist with emergency cases, her enhanced senses perfectly suited to diagnosis. David and Diego continued their medical training, while Marcus and Michael maintained their protective watch. Julia joined Harrison in the lab, their combined expertise pushing the boundaries of both traditional and enhanced medicine. The ghosts. Musk sat in its case, no longer a symbol of fear, but a reminder of transformation. Ray had kept it not because he needed it, but because it represented the truth he'd learned, and now taught others, that the most powerful choice isn't in how we fight, but in how we heal. The puppy's examination was routine, but Ray treated it with the same care he gave every patient. This was what he'd chosen, what he'd helped others choose, the daily miracle of healing, of using extraordinary abilities for ordinary good. "You know," Cooper said as the kids left with their healthy puppy, "there's a story spreading through the enhanced community about a ghost who became a healer, who showed others they could be more than weapons. They say he turned a small town veterinary clinic into a sanctuary where the most dangerous operators in the world learned to heal instead of harm." Ray smiled slightly, watching the sun set over his town, his home. "Stories grow in the telling." "This one's different," Cooper insisted. "This one gives hope, shows that no matter what's been done to you, no matter what abilities you possess, you always have a choice about how to use them." Through the gathering dusk, Ray could see his expanded family going about their work. Former weapons now dedicated to healing, one-time predators transformed into protectors. The agency had tried to create perfect soldiers, but they'd failed. To understand that true perfection lies not in power itself, but in how that power is used. "The silent healer," Cooper mused. "That's what they call you now. The ghost who learned to save lives instead of take them, and taught others to do the same." Ray picked up his medical bag, ready for his evening rounds. "No," he corrected quietly. "Not a ghost anymore. Just a veterinarian who remembers that the greatest strength lies in choosing to protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm." The night settled over Mesa Roja, but its shadows no longer held threats. Instead, they sheltered those who had chosen a different path, who had transformed their dangerous gifts into tools for healing. In this small border town, the most extraordinary power had turned out to be the simplest, the power to choose what we become and how we use the abilities we're given. The ghost was gone, but something better had taken his place, a healer who showed others that true strength lies not in the abilities we possess, but in how we choose to use them. And in Mesa Roja, those choices would always bend toward healing, toward protection, toward hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.